In this video, I'll be discussing 5 themes for you to keep your eye on as you read Beowulf. Now, it's up to you whether you want to watch this video before or after you read Beowulf. For those of you who may have read the narrative before in another class or in high school, you may want to watch this video now because you're familiar with the story, or you simply may just want to know exactly what to be looking for as you read. Some of you might also find it a little overwhelming to hear about characters and places that you still don't know anything about before reading the text. So you may want to save this video for later. It's entirely up to you. The content of this video will not be on the quiz, the Monday quiz about the material, form, and context of Beowulf. So watch this now or watch this after you read Beowulf. It's entirely up to you. All right, the first theme that I want you to be watching for as you read Beowulf is the role of Heorot. Heorot is the central mead hall of Hrothgar and his people. It's described in detail in the opening lines of Beowulf. It's also the central place that Grendel continues to attack. Grendel seems committed to destroying Heorot and what happens inside of that hall. So I want you to be thinking about why this place is so central to the narrative. Why have they made Heorot the center of the story and the place where Grendel makes his attacks? What symbolic role does Heorot play in Hrothgar's society? Heorot could have been a church. It could have been a city hall. It could have been some other kind of like central civic center, but instead it's a mead hall. So what do you think that tells us about Hrothgar and his people and what is important to that society? All right, that's theme 1. Another theme that I'd like you to pay attention to is the theme of masculinity and male-male relations throughout the tale. You may notice that there are a lot of men in Beowulf and very few women and female characters. It really is focused on men and the relationships with one another. And the term I use to describe those relationships is homosocial or homosociality, which is a term that refers to the way that people of the same sex or gender form relationships with one another. Beowulf is a text very interested in male-male homosocial relations. What binds men together, what ties them together, what ruptures them from one another. For example, we're encountering some social relations that we're not very familiar with. Beowulf is Hygelac's thane. Back home, Beowulf is the thane of his king, Hygelac, or ring giver. That's another word for thane. He basically serves Hygelac, and he talks about coming to Hrothgar's kingdom to save them from Grendel, to bring glory to Hygelac. This text is very interested in what draws Beowulf both to Hygelac, but also to Hrothgar through these various heroic actions that he undertakes. Other key figures involve Unferth, who challenges Beowulf's claim to greatness and to glory. Grendel, the main villain that Beowulf first encounters. And of course, much later in the tale, Wiglaf, the figure who eventually will replace Beowulf on the throne. So be paying attention to how this text portrays masculinity and how it portrays male-male relationships with one another. You'll also notice a number of Christian allusions throughout this text. For example, Grendel, our central villain, is described as a descendant of Cain's clan. Those of you who know the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, Genesis in particular, will be familiar with Cain, the child of Adam and Eve, who commits the first murder. This text sees Grendel as a direct descendant of the first murderer, and therefore it also seems to connect sin with monstrosity. Of course, Grendel is not a normal kind of human. He is portrayed as a kind of monster that lives in the sea, all part of this kind of Christian network of ideas being explored in this text. Furthermore, as Grendel attacks Hrothgar's kingdom and society, he seems kind of positioned against notions of community and sociality altogether. He doesn't want Hrothgar's people to gather together in the mead hall. He wants to silence the music and the poetry and the loud noises there. All of this seems to be part of the Christian commentary of this text. The text also seems preoccupied with glory and pride. These are two kind of competing ideas. Earlier, I had mentioned the notion of glory being important to epic. You've undertaken great action as a hero, and the world learns your name. They learn how important and great you are. That's glory. On the other hand, in a Christian tradition, pride is arrogance. It's a sin. It's a bad thing. And a recurring tension in this text is Beowulf rightfully glorious? Has he achieved glory, or is he proud? Which way do you think the text is portraying him? Hrothgar at one point cautions, "Do not give way to pride," at line 1760. Unferth directly challenges Beowulf and says that Beowulf is not nearly as great as he thinks he is. Of course, Beowulf has a powerful retort to Unferth as well. So this text seems to be asking questions about whether Beowulf is rightfully claiming his glory, or if he is kind of exceeding the bounds of Christian humility and in fact being very prideful. Is Beowulf ultimately the opposite of Grendel, the Christian opposed to sin? Or is he a lot like Grendel, both of them kind of pursuing arrogant action? Finally, I want us to be thinking about monstrosity as it stems from sin, according to this text, and how this text relates monstrosity to gender, because Grendel is not our only monster in this text. Grendel's mother makes a huge appearance later on, and the text seems to desire to portray her as a form of monstrous femininity. There are numerous gendered terms applied to her throughout the text. Monstrous hell bride, hell dam, swamp thing from hell, tarn hag. All of these epithets are associating monstrosity with gender. That's actually how these kennings work. Hell bride, hell dam, tarn hag, bringing together those two things. This relates to our earlier theme about masculinity, where we're asking the question, if this text is focused on male-male relationships, where do the women come in? What role do women or femininity play? Grendel's mother, of course, doesn't receive a name. She's defined in relationship to her son. She's also the only female warrior in the text, and she undertakes this kind of heroic action of avenging the death of her son. So there is something sympathetic about Grendel's mother's actions, and yet the text also seeks to portray her in a very monstrous light. So I also want us to be thinking, what is this text doing or saying about women and their relationship to action? All right, so those are the 5 themes I'd like you to be paying attention to, and you'll have the opportunity to write about any one of those themes in your discussion post this week. Follow your heart, talk about any of the themes that most interests you or that most jumps out at you, and we'll be able to kind of develop our ideas and make further connections in the discussion board this week.